Well, welcome again, everyone. Thank you for coming. As people are continuing to come into the webinar, I'm going to start a poll. So hopefully we'll be able to see this. And this just asks who you are or what kind of profession you represent, just so we can get a sense of who's on the call today. Awesome. So I see a lot of people filling out that poll. Keep filling that out. And the poll option only gives you the chance to present like 10 options. So obviously I'm not capturing all of the attendees in those options. If you're not captured in any of those options, feel free to just let us know who you are in the chat. Awesome. I see we have first year of Cleveland. We have CASA, Help Me Grow. Awesome. Providence House, researchers. Wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. And so it looks like we have a lot of early intervention and early childhood mental health providers on the call. That's awesome. A lot of other types of community partners. So yeah, continue to let us know who you are in the chat. Wonderful. So we're gonna kick things off with a little video. I'm gonna share my screen.
I see you. I see you. I feel your love. I hear your cries. I love who you are. I look forward to who you will be. You are my daughter, my son, my niece, my grandson. You are mine. I see you too. I feel you. I hear your cries. I love you so much. I will forward to life for sure. You are my grandfather, my auntie, my daddy, my mommy. You are my everything. Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two, from eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things building sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation, can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport, all those planes landing and taking off, and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead, and remember and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their mind. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
So that video does a really great job of introducing some of the really fundamental science of early childhood brain development. And we'll come back to all of that later on when we start to talk about the Safe Babies Court Team approach and how the Safe Babies Court Team approach applies that science of early childhood brain development. But before we get into that, I would really like to hear from all the attendees. Let's see, I'm going to launch a poll again. I'd love to hear from all the attendees what you all perceive as being some of the greatest needs for infants and toddlers in out-of-home care in our community. So there should be a poll launched on your screen with some multiple choice options. Feel free to choose what you see through your work or your interactions with infants and toddlers and their families in the community as some of the greatest needs. And again, obviously, this does not capture all of the needs of infants and toddlers and their families and out-of-home care in our community. So feel free to add any additional thoughts that you have in the chat. All right, keep filling out that poll. And then again, let us know any comments that you have in the chat about this, if there's anything that this poll is missing about the really urgent needs of infants and toddlers and their families. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and you should be able to see the results of that poll on your screen. So obviously all of these needs are really important to address. It seems like there are a lot of folks who notice that support for basic needs to parents and caregivers is a really big need. Awesome. Well, thank you for that really important feedback. And all of these topics are things that we're going to at least touch on once we start talking about the Safe Babies Court Team approach. And I see that some folks are putting additional thoughts in the chat. So thank you for that. So we're going to move into talking about the Safe Babies Court Team approach. I'm going to share my screen again. So before we get into really talking about this approach and what it'll mean for our county, I want to go back to that science of early childhood and brain development for just a second so that we can talk a little bit more about the context and background for this project. So 0 to 3 is a national nonprofit organization, and their mission is to ensure that all babies and toddlers have a strong start in life. And 0 to 3 leads the Safe Babies Court Team initiative nationally with funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The first Safe Babies Court Team approach, Safe Babies Court Teams were initiated by 0 to 3 in 2005, and this approach has been implemented since in about 100 sites throughout the nation. So across the country, Safe Babies Court Teams serve families with at least one child age 0 to 3 who are in out-of-home care or in risk of out-of-home care. And the approach used is really based on that science of early childhood brain development. So let's look at some of that background again. In Cuyahoga County, there are currently over 2,600 children age 0 to 3 currently involved with an open case with the Department of Child and Family Services, and over 800 of those children 0 to 3 years of age are currently in county custody. Some of the data showed on the screen, it breaks down the removal rates by race. So you can see that on average in our county, there are about 17 white children age 0 to 3 removed from their home every month, and about 50 Black children age 0 to 3 removed from their home every month. So that's some of the context for infants and toddlers and out-of-home care in our county. In addition to, and likely because of the vulnerability of early development, we also know that infants and toddlers are disproportionately overrepresented in both maltreatment rates and foster care entry rates across the country. So babies and toddlers are the largest number of maltreated children compared to other age groups. And we also know, as we saw in that video earlier, that the key periods for so many critical areas of development are happening in a baby's first 3 years of life. So as you can see, the optimal period of time for language development, sensory development, cognitive development, et cetera, are all happening in a baby's first 3 years of life. So the early years really lay that critical foundation for success in all areas of development. And we also know that critical attachment processes are taking place in the first few years of life as well. So babies form healthy attachment relationships when caregivers can provide consistent, responsive, and nurturing care. But that process is easily disrupted when caregiving is neglectful, responsive, or inconsistent. And this inconsistency could have lifelong impairments on the child's ability to trust, to regulate their emotions, and to feel safe. And lastly, we also know that brain development of babies is significantly impacted and derailed by traumatic experiences. In addition, all of the parents involved in the child welfare and family court systems were once children too, and many have significant trauma histories of their own. So their brains may have been shaped by their own trauma histories in early childhood. And we'll come back to that later. So let's actually get into learning about the Safe Babies Court Team approach itself. The Safe Babies Court Team approach applies that science of, sorry about that. Go back to that slide. So the Safe Babies Court Team approach applies all of this science of early childhood brain development that we just talked about. And it's really addressing the urgent needs of infants and toddlers and strengthening their families. So the target population for this approach is children birth to 3 years of age who are involved in the child welfare and court systems and are in out-of-home placement, and their families. And the overall goal of this work is very broad and comprehensive. It's to advance the health and well-being of young children and families so that they can flourish. And this is done through promoting healthy child development, supporting family resiliency, and building community capacity to address and prevent child abuse and neglect. So I'm going to use this graphic on the screen of a landscape so that we can all visualize how this approach works and comes together. So using this graphic, we'll walk through this landscape to represent what it will be like for our community to walk through the process of implementing the Safe Babies Court Team approach. So as we walk through this graphic, we start in a forest. Families in our community and our family serving systems are currently in this forest. And the trees in this forest represent the challenges that families and systems are currently facing. The challenge is really the struggle that child welfare and court systems face in being able to best address the unique developmental needs of babies, and their challenge in being able to address the comprehensive and individual needs of families. Also, their challenge in being able to address those deep racial inequities and disparities that exist. And we saw some of that data earlier. So then, as you can see, there's this road out of the forest. And that road, Safe Babies Court Team approach is really part of this road out of the forest. So this road starts with the National Resource Center that 0 to 3 has, which is supporting our site and implementation of this approach, as well as our statewide team, which is working to support the spread of the Safe Babies Court Team approach throughout Ohio and making sure that this work stays sustainable from a statewide perspective. So moving further along this road, we come to the local community at the center. And that's because this work is all about different systems coming together to address the needs of infants and toddlers collaboratively. So the Department of Child and Family Services and the Juvenile Court are key players, as are all of the other systems and agencies in the county that interact with babies and their families. Then we have these key activities, and this is what actually makes the approach work. We'll look really deeply into each of these key activities in just a moment. But through those key activities, you'll get this rainbow of impacts created through those key activities and through collaborations that form in the community. So this rainbow shows the more immediate positive impacts on children and families in the inner rows of the rainbow, and the more long-term systems and community impacts on the outer rows of the rainbow. So through those key activities, attachment relationships are nurtured and protected, and child development is kept on a healthy track. Professionals in all of these systems and families are empowered to engage in best practices, and new policies and procedures are developed that ensure equitable services across the country. I'm sorry, county, well, hopefully across the country as well. And then towards the end of this presentation, we'll get into the actual data from other sites that use this approach, and we'll talk about how we know that this approach is working. So the Safe Babies Court Team approach really addresses needs at both the level of the individual families that will serve and the level of the entire county system. So starting in most likely the late summer of this year, families that come to the attention of the child welfare system who have at least one baby 0 to 3 years of age that becomes placed in an out-of-home placement, they'll be eligible to participate directly in the Safe Babies Court Team docket. They may be offered to voluntarily elect to participate. With those families who are actually participating in Safe Babies Court Team, professionals will work together to identify the family's needs and challenges and get them quickly connected to specific and tailored community resources that they need. At the same time, there will be a broad team of multidisciplinary professional stakeholders, and they're also simultaneously working on identifying any gaps or challenges with resources, programming, and processes countywide, and they're working on addressing community-wide challenges collaboratively. So let's take a look at each of the core components and those key activities from the last slide of the Safe Babies Court Team approach, and we'll look at how each of them will be operationalized. So the first core component of the Safe Babies Court Team approach is judicial and child welfare leadership. In Cuyahoga County, our judicial leader is Judge Kristen Sweeney in the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court, and we're really lucky to have Judge Sweeney on this call today, and we're lucky to have her leading this effort from the bench. There are also many Department of Child and Family Services staff, including Director Cynthia Weiskettle, who we're also really lucky to have on this call today, working to spearhead these efforts within the agency. But the best efforts of both the juvenile court and the Department of Child and Family Services can only be most effective when they're combined with the work of the whole community and all of the other agencies, organizations, and individuals who impact the lives of infants and toddlers in care. So that's where I come in, and I, as the community coordinator for our site, am working on really exploring all the individuals, programs, and organizations that support our target population of families in the county. So families that Safe Babies Court Team is designed to serve may and hopefully will receive support from early intervention providers, early childhood mental health providers, healthcare providers, child care providers, substance use treatment providers, and adult mental health providers. They might have peer supporters or advocates. They likely have a foster caregiver looking after their child and attorneys involved in their lives. So my job is to identify all those types of people who will support our target population of families and coordinate them and pull them into this work. So my job as the community coordinator is really to be the convener of this work. And members of our community are already doing this type of fantastic service provision and support work on behalf of infants and toddlers and their families. So my job is to bring everyone together at the same table. So the third core component of this approach is the active community team. And this team will be made up of the types of key community stakeholders and service providers throughout the county that I just listed. So really any organization or agency or individual that impacts the lives of infants and toddlers in care and their families. All of those types of people are encouraged to be part of this team. This team will meet monthly to engage in collaborative work across systems that serve young children and families. And these meetings really foster a learning environment that encourages an interdisciplinary approach to reducing the siloing of services. So the active community team works to identify any gaps in the availability, accessibility, or alignment of services and supports for children and families. They identify any challenges or processes or procedures for professionals working with families, and they discuss patterns identified by data analysis. So this active community team will really help us build the capacity to channel the collective impact created by the strength of multiple systems working together. And we already have a number of local organizations and agencies who have been working with us on our planning teams. They include the Neighborhood Collaboratives, Bright Beginnings, Invest in Children, the Healthy Fathering Collaborative, many more. A lot of the individuals on this call today I know are from agencies that have been involved in our planning work or will be involved in our active community team. And we'll be looking to add greatly to that list of partners through their involvement in this team. So the fourth core component of this approach involves family team meetings. So in addition to the active community team that's working on systems level change throughout the county, each individual family involved in Safe Babies Court Team has a team just for them that includes all of the individuals who are providing any direct services to the family or working in any way on the family's child welfare or court case. So this team will be likely made up of their attorneys, their case manager, their mental health treatment providers, the child's early intervention provider or child care provider, other family members, the current caregiver for the child, and anyone who the parent sees as a strong support person for them. So these family teams meet monthly and they really foster an environment of compassion, transparency, and child-focused problem solving that is responsive to the parents' needs while keeping the infants and toddlers' experiences in mind. And core component number 5 is about concurrent planning. So permanency is achieved when a baby has found their forever home. And since foster care is not permanent, we need to be working towards having a permanent and stable living arrangement for the child. So utilizing concurrent planning means that Safe Babies Court Team family teams will be really intentional in planning for sustainable permanency from the very beginning of a family's case. We're always working towards reunification for Safe Babies Court Team families with their children that are in out-of-home care, but we also need to have a clear plan B from the very start. So this is where we need to make sure that in the worst case scenario of a baby not being able to return home to their parents, we'll have a safe and healthy plan B. So this is similar to having a will where we know that if something happens to parents, we know what the next best plan is for their children. And in Safe Babies Court Team, parents play a key decision role in developing that plan B or that concurrent plan. So core component 6 is all about meeting parents where they are. And this is about really recognizing when parents' own behaviors and struggles are the result of their own childhood trauma. We kind of touched on that earlier. And working to really support those parents in a trauma-informed manner, as well as valuing those parents' perspectives in the decision-making process for their children. So quality work within our family teams really requires us to focus deeply on supporting parents in their own healing. And core component 7 is about increasing the frequency and quality of visitation time that biological parents have with their children in out-of-home care. So Safe Babies Court Team families will have a lot of time with their children, and this really serves to facilitate healthy attachment formation. So we know that children can and should form multiple healthy attachment relationships with multiple caring adults. So even while forming a healthy attachment relationship with their out-of-home caregiver, it's also so important to maintain and foster a healthy attachment relationship with their biological family as well. And then we also know that it's really important not only to build healthy relationships between parents and their children and caregivers and those children, but also to build strong relationships between parents and caregivers. So our work really promotes co-parenting strategies that build a strong relationship between parents and the caregivers that are currently taking care of their children. Core component 8 is about assessment-driven needs identification and fast connection to evidence-based services in the community. So this is about really putting high-quality services in place for parents and their babies right away from the time that their case opens, and tailoring those services to make sure they are specifically individualized to meet that family's unique needs. And then core component 9 is about building up parents' natural and long-lasting supports within their own community. So services are important for our families, but this core component means that we go beyond making sure that a family receives professional services to meet their needs. We also really want to make sure that families have their own unique support system around them that will last a lifetime. So Safe Babies Court Team isn't about just helping families do what they need to get their children back. We really want to work to prepare families for sustained community level support to ensure that they're not going to end back in these systems. And in order to do so, Safe Babies Court Team family team professionals will be really intentional about viewing families through a lens of social determinants of health. So within the family team meetings for each Safe Babies Court Team family, we will look at all of the areas of a family's life to really ensure that they have the quality and lasting infrastructure they need for stability within their own community. So we really want representatives from all of these areas of service and supports to be part of our active community team. We really need the experts in all of these areas at the table so that we know about the best supports available to families in the community. And then lastly, core component 10 is about continuous quality improvement. So lots of data will be collected regarding the families served, and we'll be able to further tailor the processes and approach based on a rigorous data analysis of what's working and what's not. So when we look at the data from other communities who have implemented the Safe Babies Court Team approach, we see some pretty promising results. So the recurrence rate of maltreatment, or the amount of families who re-entered the child welfare system due to new additional reports of maltreatment after the closure of their original case, was 0.7% on average with families served by Safe Babies Court Team. And that's compared to the Children's Bureau national standard of 9.1%. In addition, Safe Babies Court Team is working to ensure that babies' placements while in foster care stay stable. And the national standard for placement stability is 66.1% of babies in the foster care system who have less than 3 total placements during their time in foster care. For Safe Babies Court Team served families, 79% of those babies have less than 3 total placements, meaning a slightly higher stability than the standards set by the Children's Bureau. And when we look at permanency outcomes for young children participating in Safe Babies Court Team sites, we see that those actually double the national standard expectations established by the Children's Bureau. So we see that the data indicates that 83.7% on average of Safe Babies Court Team involved children reached permanency within 12 months compared to that national standard of 40.5%. And the vast majority of families who participated in Safe Babies Court Team in other counties were also connected to the evidence-based services that they needed in their community much more consistently and quickly than on average. And we also know that children of color are disproportionately overrepresented in child welfare systems. We know that most child welfare systems across the US, racial disparities actually deepen at each point in the child welfare decision-making process. So nationally speaking, white children, no matter the challenges that their parents face in providing a safe and stable home, are more likely to be reunified with their parents than is the case for children of color. We saw some of that local data earlier that demonstrates the current racial disparity in the rates that Black children in our county are removed from their home versus white children in our county. So along with the many other steps that the Child Welfare Agency and the court systems have taken and are currently taking in our county to address those racial disparities, the work of Safe Baby's court team will also need to be intentional about addressing these deep racial disparities. So counties that implement Safe Baby's court team are in a unique position to advance equity because within this framework, there are many key stakeholders, including judges, child welfare representatives, attorneys, child serving organizations who are all coming together to collaborate. And we know that all of those folks have a critical role to play in advancing equity. So although the core components of Safe Baby's core team apply equally to families, implementing them with families of color will really require our teams to consider targeted and intentional actions aimed at really building an understanding and evaluating decision-making processes through a lens of racial equity. So a critical part of evaluating this work is disaggregating the data from the last two slides by race, and that's what's shown on this slide. So data from other counties who have implemented the Safe Baby's core team approach, it shows that children of all races and ethnicities have fared statistically equally well when served by Safe Baby's core teams. And lastly, Safe Baby's core team really takes a two-generational approach. So we're really working to prevent what will likely happen down the line for this entire family if this type of thoughtful intervention is not received. We saw this in the intro video earlier, but we know that many adults who are involved in the criminal justice system, who have severe physical and mental health needs, and who end up with children in the foster care system themselves are adults who likely experienced trauma early in life that was not addressed adequately. So Safe Baby's court team work is really about developing healthy brains for these babies so that later on in their life, they aren't on the trajectory for poor health and social outcomes, and therefore preventing a lifelong trajectory for continued systems involvement. And in addition, many of the parents who are involved in Safe Baby's court team may go on to have more children. So Safe Baby's court team helps make sure that those parents don't have to then re-enter the child welfare and court systems with their younger babies. So in summary, Safe Baby's core team is really all about systems transformation and about bringing together all the systems that serve infants and toddlers in care together to work towards community-wide collaboration in Cuyahoga County. So please feel free to jot down any of my contact information at this time. If you have any questions on any of that information, please just jot it down or put it in the chat for us to save for later, but we'll get to a question and answer portion later in the event. Right now, I'm going to transition to hearing from a panel of leaders on this initiative. So huge thank you to Judge Kristen Sweeney, Cynthia Weiskettle, Alyssa Huthbox, Eva Klein, and Verna Darby for being with us today. And to start, we'll begin with some prepared questions for each of the panelists, and at the end, there will be time for myself and the panelists to answer your questions from the chat box. But before we do that, I'll ask each panelist just to briefly introduce themselves and their connection to this initiative. So we'll start with Judge Kristen Sweeney.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So I started in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court in the Public Defender's Office in May of 1998. I was first elected in November of 2004 to this bench. I have presided over the Family Recovery Court or the Family Drug Court since the beginning of 2007. And the Phoenix Court, which is the Juvenile Mental Health Court, since 2008. And I was the administrative judge here for 6 years from 2014 until 2019. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Judge Sweeney. And we'll move to Cynthia Wise-Kettle to introduce yourself and your connection to the project.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Weiss-Kettle. I'm the Director of Children and Family Services. I started with the agency more than 30 years ago as a frontline worker. I've worked in just about every department here, as well as a liaison across the country in a process called team decision making. We are very committed to the project. It fits well with our mission, and we're eager to get started.
Thank you. And we'll move to Eva Klein to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm with the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law, and I'm the Director of Child and Adolescent Health, and so our partnership with 0 to 3 falls under that bucket of work. Our partnership primarily consists of supporting attorneys within the Safe Babies court teams across the country. And so helping with attorney engagement in the leadership and also just on the case level and systems level in terms of collaboration and supporting the work that attorneys do.
Thank you, Eva. We'll move to Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Huth-Box. I'm a clinical psychologist from Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. I have spent my career in the field of infant mental health, doing a lot of different things, including basic science and research, some of which we heard earlier, teaching and training the workforce, as well as doing clinical work with mothers and babies from the context of infant mental health. I spent the first part of my career, about 15 or 20 years in the state of Michigan, and am credentialed as an infant mental health specialist there, and still work with lots of colleagues back in Michigan, many of whom actually have done an amazing Safe Babies court team in Detroit. Maybe we'll learn about that at some point. So so I'm very familiar with Safe Babies court team, and just am totally committed to the principles behind Safe Babies court in terms of addressing these issues as early as possible and promoting relationships. And so I'm really happy to be here. This is exciting.
Thank you. And last but not least, Verna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Verna Darby. I am the Family Advancement Manager with Birth and Beautiful Communities. We are a perinatal support program. We help families during their pregnancy, labor and delivery, and we stay with our families 1 year postpartum. And I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you all. We're really lucky to have you, and your perspectives on this initiative are all very important. So I'm going to start with just one question for each panelist, and I'll start with Judge Sweeney. So Judge Sweeney, why do you feel it's important that we implement a court team specifically focused on infants and toddlers?
So over the many years that I've been involved in the juvenile justice system, we've had a lot of change in the way this court handles abuse, neglect, and dependency cases. There's been a drastic reduction since the 90s of the number of children in foster care. It's been cut in half. It used to be that when permanent custody was granted, there would be one final visit with the biological family, and then it was completely cut off. The court never allowed foster children into the courtrooms under nearly any circumstances, and all of the institutions that dealt with these, that were working with these families, I should say, were siloed. We didn't have a CASA program. There's just been all kinds of changes over the years. We've come a long way, but it's been a lot of work, and we have worked really hard to build relationships and to change the culture. But cultural change is not linear, but each change is important, and it builds on the other. Why is it important that we have a court team based on infants and toddlers? So there's been an incredible amount of development in the scientific understanding of infants and toddlers, but court culture is specifically designed to change slowly. it can be extremely hard for those of us working in the court system to stay current on medical and research. It can be a struggle for us to find the time to look at the research and then even to find it. And we don't know, it's not always clear to us how we should implement the research when we do find it. Or how we should even evaluate the quality of the research. I also think it's important for the medical and treatment systems to understand the way research is used in court processes. As I read yesterday in an article called Attachment and Human Development that Delaney gave me, quote, a major challenge regarding scientific data also derives from the contrasting aspirations of science in the courts. While science generalizes, usually from individual cases to general principles, the court particularizes, sometimes from general principles back to individual cases, end quote. So we have very different approaches, and in order for our different systems to understand each other, we need to work together in a spirit of open-mindedness and respect. We build relationships through programs like this one, and specifically these kinds of relationships allow us in the court to develop practices informed by science and research. Specifically to this program, I am very excited about the new approach to visitation and to caregiver and biological parent relationships. Particularly in the last year, we have all struggled with the issue of visitation in foster care. Visitation has been remote, and I've heard from more than one social worker that foster parents have threatened to disrupt the placement if it is ordered to be in person. So I will say that this program is a ray of sunshine in what has otherwise been a very bleak year. And I'm also excited to see caregivers and biological families work together in a planned way, which would be a brand new thing from the court's perspective. And then finally, I'm hopeful that this docket can serve as a model for expanding some of these principles into other cases that are not on this docket. One of the ways that we've been able to create system-wide change is to start with small programs, see what works, see what doesn't, and discuss how to implement those changes so that they are, in my words, sticky. One of the most important things about creating cultural change in the court system, or really any system, is to get buy-in from line staff. You know, there are 500 employees in the court system and 500 employees or more in children and family services. And they are the ones that are ultimately going to be implementing some of these things. So we need to respect the people who are actually doing the work with the families. And so I wanna be able to use some of the stuff that we develop in this program and see if we can expand it. Because I feel like every infant and every parent of an infant should be able to visit, hopefully as much as we can. I mean, that's not practical right now, but you know, it'd be nice to see how we can do it. Well, what's possible? Let's explore what's possible. So, so that's why I'm really excited about this program.
Well, thank you so much, Judge Sweeney. And I really appreciate your thoughts on the importance of countywide collaboration in a spirit of open-mindedness. I think that really captures what this program is all about. And we appreciate your leadership on this initiative. So I'll move to Cynthia Weiskettle. And my question for you is, what are your hopes for infants and toddlers in custody of Cuyahoga County?
So in child welfare, the child welfare system is built on 3 pillars. It's built on the pillar of safety, permanency, and child well-being. So as has already been shared, we have over 800 children in custody who are under the age of 3. Now, in many ways that makes sense because the younger a child is, the less ability they have to self-protect. But it is also critical that we are removing a fair amount of children right at birth from their parents. And as Judge Sweeney shared, it is critically important that if we want bonding to occur and for a child to be able to go home, they must have frequent visits. So one of the things that will be hardest for us to accomplish, but one thing that I'm very excited about, is the idea of children seeing their parents more than a few times a week or more. I think what we know in child welfare, the data tells us very clearly, frequent visitation is one of the biggest predictors of whether or not a child will go home. So as a system that must remove children when it is unsafe or we cannot make them safe in the community, it is of equal importance that we achieve permanency, that children don't languish in the child welfare system, start moving placement to placement. We know that all of these kind of activities lead to worse outcomes. So I'm very excited about the idea of quick connection to services. I'm very excited about the idea of a community. I don't mean to sound trite, but it really does take a community to protect a child. And I am all about that notion. And again, we know that if kids are connected to their parents early and we keep them bonded, they're more likely to go home and more likely to be healthier. And so for child welfare, we couldn't ask for better outcomes.
Yes, thank you. And the work that the Department of Child and Family Services is doing on this initiative is absolutely critical. So we really appreciate your thoughts. And then moving forward to Alyssa, my question for you, Alyssa, is based on the science of early childhood brain development, why do you feel that this work is really essential?
Well, Delaney, you mentioned earlier that these were prepared questions. So indeed, I did prepare. And I wanted to, my role on the panel is also to talk about the science, as you mentioned. And so I did put together a couple slides just to, again, to represent the science. And I loved the video at the beginning, which also covered the science. So I just want to reaffirm, I guess, or reinforce some of the core principles of the science of early childhood, which really, really support something like Safe Babies Court. So thanks for putting those slides up. So if you can just click, we heard earlier, and I know I am absolutely preaching to the choir, that the first couple years of life during infancy are absolutely the most critical years and the most critical developmental time for brain development. And it's really astounding to think about. Researchers have estimated that maybe upwards of 1 million neurons are created a second, and hundreds of neural connections, those are the connections between the neurons to help the neurons communicate with one another, are built per second. And this is just incredible, this massive amount of brain development that's going on during infancy. And early experiences, this is not just built, what pre-wired. This is entirely dependent on the child's or the infant's experiences in the world, and especially their experiences in relationships. So you can go to the next slide. Well, another amazing thing about infancy is, if you look to the far left, that the brain's ability to change or to be plastic, we talk about plasticity of the brain, is the greatest in the first couple years of life. So we have a massive explosion of brain growth and development. And in this very same window, the brain is the most adaptable. It's the most flexible, the most plastic. And this can be for better or for worse. So when there's lots of good things happening in infancy, this is just going to be wonderful for the brain. When there's lots of bad things like stress, trauma, adversity, it's going to impact the brain to a big degree. So for better or for worse, the infant brain is the most capable of or able to change. And then you see, as you go on across the lifespan, the ability of the brain to adapt to change or to respond to change decreases with time, and the amount of effort it takes to make changes or to improve brain functioning increases. And so click one more time, Delaney. This is like the period of time we are all in. And I know everybody here is in this space, and I'm preaching to the choir again, but this is just a really amazing opportunity. Yeah, you can click through those. We heard earlier in the video that trauma during infancy has major negative impacts on the brain and lots of different parts of it. So it changes brain architecture, how the neurons are connected. It affects the brain activity level, and we see the more trauma a baby is exposed to, the greater likelihood that they're going to have neurodevelopmental damage or negative effects that are going to need to be repaired. But the next slide shows that it's not all, oh, actually not quite. We know that this also affects the rest of the body system. So it's not just brain will affect the rest of the body system. So we know we need to impact this and intervene as early as possible. But the next slide shows us that there's a bright side to it, and that it's buffering, protective, nurturing, supportive relationships that all of us are working towards for these babies and their caregivers can not only build the brain, it can also buffer the effects of adversity. And so it can protect the child or the baby, their brain, body, mind, and relationships when we can enhance these buffering relationships. And Delaney, I also want to just reinforce one thing you said, that babies can form multiple attachments, and they do. So we're not talking about a single caregiver or a single attachment figure. We want to build a circle of these buffering relationships around babies. So you can skip past the next one. And then I just want to end with saying that, and we all know it again, the science of early development needs to inform our policy and practice. And that is exactly what Safe Babies Court Team does, the model. The three major pillars that are being promoted, and this is taken from the Center on the Developing Child, that really, it might be our magic potion, if you will, is for both adults and children, we really want to work hard to support responsive relationships. That's important for everybody. It's a major protective factor. We want to do everything we can to reduce sources of stress for both parents and caregivers of children and children. And we want to strengthen core skills. And those are those sort of individual level skills that build resilience. And if we can, this is really supported by the science. These three things are absolutely critical principles or pillars. And we need to use the science to inform what we do, which is exactly what Safe Babies Court Team is doing. So from a scientist perspective, I couldn't be more excited about this work. And thank you so much for being here today and supporting the work and all that you do in the community.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. That really nicely summarized all of the really important parts of the science that informs this work. And next I'll move on to Eva. And my question for you, Eva, is what do you feel are the benefits to families who participate in this approach?
Thanks so much, Delaney. And so I'm going to take a little liberty with that question and expand it a little bit beyond just families, but also the stakeholders and from my perspective, clearly the attorneys as well who participate in the program, because I think that the two PowerPoints were really powerful in describing the benefit to families from the approach itself, and then on the brain science, that's just so powerful. So obviously working within a system that supports those positive connections is something that the families would directly benefit from. But our involvement, as I mentioned earlier, is really working with attorneys. And so we develop resources and we lead a community of practice for attorneys. So the families as clients of the attorneys, or even the agency as a client, or as represented by the government, attorneys really can benefit from that type of collaboration and learning environment that's created within the Safe Babies Court Team national effort. And our efforts specifically also on attorney engagement are focused on three, we have a new site, an established site, and Ohio is our statewide site. So the resources of the ABA are available to the attorneys within your site, specifically in terms of our focus primarily on the quality of legal representation. And so we try to tie those hallmarks of quality and how they align with the Safe Babies Court Team approach, and how that approach supports the attributes and those quality hallmarks. So we work also in terms of collaboration. So the families directly benefit from a system that has improved collaboration, and also developing those relationships that can help on the case level as well, because it's those relationships that often can on the individual case level help achieve better outcomes. And I think something, Delaney, that you mentioned in your presentation, and just how trauma infuses everything, or knowledge of trauma and trauma responsive advocacy infuses the work of the Safe Babies Court teams. And that affects not just the parents' interactions with their babies and their infants and toddlers, but also their interactions with their attorneys and with the system, and also then how the system responds, including how parents are treated in court and how they are able to have a voice in the process. So that is definitely a benefit to families as well. And then something that I want to echo that Judge Sweeney mentioned was that one related benefit for families overall, and not just those in the Safe Babies Court team, is that some of the best practices or improved practices that can occur within the Safe Babies Court team can then be brought out to the larger child welfare caseload. And so an improvement in quality or improvement in assignment of attorneys and appointment of attorneys can then help benefit other families who may not be part of the Safe Babies Court team, but definitely can see an improvement in how the system responds. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really excited about the participation of the American Bar Association in this work, and the support that the American Bar Association will be able to provide to attorneys in our site who are participating in this work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then lastly, I'll move to Verna. And Verna, you have so much experience working with families in the community. So I'm curious, what do families, both mothers and fathers, need to be successful parents to their babies?
Again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna come from a grassroots approach. The village, the community, the parents need to utilize every resource they have. They need to utilize that from that neighbor, that elder neighbor. Sometimes you have to. Your family may not always be blood. It may just be the neighborhood. Trusting, communication, consistency with all of that. And then hopefully they don't get in the system. So that's part of what we do, is try to connect the dots of life. So you do have stable house and you do know how to navigate family, because that's sometimes the issues. Like, I don't know what to do. I have this new person here. I'm growing this baby, and then I have this baby. What do I do? So it's a ton of resources out here for families, a matter of utilizing them. But one thing, sometimes families, they don't trust everybody. So it's about trust, about consistency, about communication. And some of the families, even with our infants, they're scared. The families are scared. So when they get there, they're pregnant and they have their baby. It's a joyous time. Oh, I have my baby. But then here's the social workers like, we got to take your baby. So that's just like a gut punch to the parents. And they will have to learn to trust this system. Like, if they say, you know what, if you do this, this, and this, you're going to get your baby back. But we have to, again, that village mentality, that community mentality, that trust, the communication, and the consistency. We can't say, oh, you're going to get your baby back. I went to the classes, but I still can't have my baby back. Why? What do I need to do? And I'm kind of frank person. The parent might say, do I need to cartwheel through the streets to get my baby back? I'll do that. You still can't get your baby back. Well, what do I need to do? So the trust, the communication, we have a powerful team here. But from my lens, when I'm working with this mother, when I have her here, when I have her in tears saying, Miss Verna, what do I need to do? My house is clean, my kids are fed. Then they say, well, what's wrong with me? What do I need to do to get my baby back? So again, working with the parents to be that good parent, that family, is working with our community, utilizing the tools that we have, the different programs, the jobs, the village. And then even when they do get involved, it's okay to go see if they trust Miss Jones. Miss Jones is like, I can take the baby. And mom might be right there to say, I trust Miss Jones. So she's feeling better. So she's like, okay, Jones got my baby. I'm gonna work to get my baby, you know. So it's about reaching out to our community, our village, of people, especially for our parents, for our mom and dad, the extended family, that great aunt, that grandmother, that cousin, or somebody that's just going to have to say, okay, let's wrap our arms around this family to make sure that this baby is fine. Because in the end, that's it. It's all about the children. So I hope I answered the question pretty good.
You did. Yeah. Thank you, Verna. And a lot of what you said, I think, ties in really well with the 6th core component of this approach, the one about meeting parents where they are, and the importance of that trust and really clear and consistent communication in building that trust. And a lot of what you said also really touches on the 9th core component of this approach too, the nurturing parents' relationships and building social supports in the community. So making sure that those families have the long-lasting, sustained support system around them within their own community. And that's what you're talking about with a village, really building a village around not only that baby, but the whole family. So
Yes, because once they get the baby back, don't just, sometimes they feel like, okay, got my baby back, I'm fine. But no, it has to be, sometimes it goes to the children are 18. Sometimes you have to kind of keep, that consistency with the family.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And thanks to all of the panelists. And at this point, I'll ask any of the attendees to let us know any questions that you have in the chat box. And I noticed that there are already a couple of questions in the chat box. One of those questions was if we can share the slides from earlier after the meeting, and I'll absolutely do that. Everyone that registered for the event will receive a link to a recording and the slides, so you'll have that information. And I noticed that someone else asked in the chat who will be collecting and analyzing the service and outcome data for Safe Babies Core Team families, and that's a great question. 0 to 3, the national nonprofit who leads this initiative, they have a specific database for Safe Babies Core Team families. So when families voluntarily elect to participate in Safe Babies Core Team, they will receive informed consent information about the information that is collected in the 0 to 3 database. And that is really what's used to work on this core component 10 of continuous quality improvement. We really look at that data and do rigorous data analysis to determine what's working well, what's not working well. And we're continuously evolving the approach and adapting and tailoring based on that data. And our statewide team, as well as the 0 to 3 National Resource Center, have a lot of folks who their role in this project is specifically dedicated to that, looking at that data and analyzing that data. So we have a lot of support on that from 0 to 3 and from the statewide team. Another question in the chat, and feel free with any of these questions, panelists, feel free to jump in and share your thoughts as well. But Kenny asked, how can we get this information out to all professionals involved? And that's a great question, Kenny. Like I mentioned earlier, the active community team for Safe Babies is really open invite, and any and all individuals in the community who impact the lives of our target population of families are really invited to be a part of this work. So I will put the slide up at the end of the event that has my contact information. A lot of the participants today on the call I've already connected with personally, or I've connected with another representative from the organization that you work with. But if I have not yet connected with you or a representative from your organization, please send me an email. I'd love to connect with you one-on-one and talk about ways that you can be involved in this work and that we can collaborate. And then the active community team, like I mentioned, is open invite. So once we connect, you're more than welcome to be part of that ongoing work that will start probably around July of this year. I don't know if anyone else from the panel has any thoughts on involving community partners beyond that, but it's a really important piece. I see Crystal. Oh, Judge Sweeney, I think you're on
Can I
mute.
say, there have been 166 people involved in this call, which on one hand, I just find that astonishing. Each of you has a voice, and my hope is that each of you will go back to your workplaces and share this information with your colleagues. I mean, those kind of small steps are vitally important to, you know, getting the word out. So I would invite you to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judge Sweeney.
And I wanted to just throw out there, sometimes mentoring a family, if you do see a family in crisis, sometimes that mentoring, or just, you know, if they trust you, you can mentor them or just be there for them. And sometimes that as a prevention measure, you know, say, I see you going down this path, let me pull you back. So we do have a large group on here. If it's, you know, you see somebody in crisis, a family in crisis, you know, kind of tap them on the shoulder. And even if you need to reach out to the Safe Baby Court to say, what do I need to do as a preventive measure before they land here? So yeah, that, you know, that's one thing I believe, you know, like I said, we do have a large group of people on here. So yeah, mentoring a family, you know, helping a family, when you see somebody in crisis, you know, just like you see somebody get ready to get hit by a car, like knock them out the way and let me help you.
Yeah.
Again, the
Yeah, and we know that Safe Babies Court Team will be serving families that have already come to the attention of the child welfare system. But we also know that there are tons of, and a lot of folks on this call actually, involved in work to prevent any initial entry into the child welfare system. And that primary prevention work is so, so important. So our partners on the call who are involved in that primary and secondary prevention work are really important part of this puzzle. And I invite you to all be a part of the active community team and be part of this work as well. And I see that Julia, our statewide coordinator, who is an attendee, she put a link to a website in the chat that's a really great resource if you are looking for something quick to send over to colleagues about the Safe Babies Court Team approach. You can click that link. It's on Groundwork Ohio's website. But Cynthia Weiskettle and Verna Darby both touched on the fact that it takes a village to raise children, and the participants on this call are that village. We're all that village. So I'm appreciative of you all coming today. So getting back to the questions, Crystal asked if we mentioned that participation for this program will be optional / will families be invited to participate in Safe Babies Court Team? And that's correct. Families that are eligible, basically just meaning that they have a baby 0 to 3, that baby is in out-of-home care within Cuyahoga County, they will be offered to voluntarily elect to participate in the program. And then Alana asked a great question as well. She said, how will parents and their voice and experience be represented on the active community team? And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think that's a really important piece of the work that we'll do as an active community team. It can't just be just professionals in the room, even though obviously professionals have a very important voice to share on the active community team. We also need the voice of folks in the community who will have direct experience in these systems. And we're looking to our community partners to help us with that a little bit. Like I said, the active community team is open invite. So any families that you know of in the community who might be interested in being part of this work, please reach out to them and let them know. I'd be happy to connect with them. We're already connected with a few parents and a few foster caregivers who are looking to be part of that team and to have their voice be part of this process on an ongoing basis. And that's wonderful, but definitely looking to expand that. So again, share my contact information around. We definitely need the voice of parents involved in this. I don't know if any of the panelists want to add to that, but if not, I'll move to the next question. Okay, great.
Well, Delaney, I was just gonna say also you held a number of listening sessions, right?
Yeah, we held a number of listening sessions in early April. So we were able to hear, we were able to make that initial first connection with parents, a group of parents in the community and a group of foster and kinship caregivers in the community, and start to hear their voice. But that's just the first step. And I'm hoping to maintain a continued relationship with all of those attendees of those listening sessions. They have really important feedback in this process, and we're looking to, like I said, add to that group of individuals, adding their perspective into this work. So moving on to the next question, I see Tracy asked, she said, I know the goal is to reunify the family, but what happens when the family is not meeting the case plan or showing no interest in reunification? And I think that question really goes back to our core component. I think it's number 6 about concurrent planning. And so I think what you're speaking to really emphasizes the importance of starting that process of concurrent planning really early on. And I know the Department of Child and Family Services is already utilizing concurrent planning, and we'll continue to do that within the Safe Babies Court team framework, but we'll really make sure that there is a plan B for permanency from the very beginning, and that the parent has a voice in that decision-making process of what is that plan B. They have an important role to play in figuring out what that concurrent plan should be. So we involve them in that as part of our family team meeting process. And we start really early on, and we communicate really clearly with the family about the fact that we have a concurrent plan. And it does not mean that we're not working tirelessly to support reunification, but it means that every family has to have a backup plan. I know my family has a plan, has had a plan when I was a child about what would happen if something ever happened to my parents, and concurrent planning is really the same sort of thing. If any of the panelists have any more thoughts on what do we do when a family is not able to meet the case plan requirements, feel free to jump in.
Well, I think one of the other things we do at the beginning is to ensure that we've done an adequate job of identifying as many relatives that can support a child. We are currently piloting a project called 30 Days to Family. And the idea is identifying as many family members that could be a part of this child's life. So it fits nicely with the idea of concurrent planning. If a child cannot go home, hopefully that child can be placed with its family, its extended family. And if reunification is not the plan, that permanency can be achieved by keeping that child within the extended family. So I think that's other work we are doing to try to make sure that kids don't stay in out-of-home care any longer than they need to.
Yeah, that's really important. Sometimes I ran into some parents that, you know, they realize I'm not cut out to be a parent. And when they realize that, and when we say it's okay, you know, no judgment, then yeah, to have that backup plan. But if Auntie get my baby, I'm okay. You know, if Big Mama get my baby, you know, I'm okay. One thing also that I wanted to mention about the like if a parent goes to jail and they have a baby in jail, how is that type of reunification? Would that be a safe baby court case?
That's a great question, and something that we'll have to come back and like explore more with our leadership team. The visitation standard would definitely be a barrier and a challenge in that case, but that's not to say that that parent is not a good fit for this docket and not, and that they could not benefit greatly from this type of work. I don't know if Judge Sweeney or anyone else wants to comment on that.
Yeah. So I would say it would depend on the precise circumstances of why they are incarcerated. If they have committed a violent act against the child or a sibling of the child, that is a consideration as to what the court is going to do. That is not a common occurrence. The bigger issue is how the length of their incarceration. Honestly, are they in jail for a few days, which is kind of a non-issue, or are they incarcerated for several years? So it depends upon the precise nature of their incarceration, and specifically then the length. And so every case is different. So.
Delaney, if I could also comment, going back a little bit to the previous question about parents who are unable to reunify, I think one of the benefits to families is the ability of the team to really focus on reasonable efforts. And I think especially for attorneys to ensure that reasonable efforts for their clients are being provided. And so since reunification is the preferred goal, I think that this approach provides that added support to ensure that those efforts are case specific, family specific, and that those findings are met, those requirements are met.
Yes, thank you. So hopefully we answered those questions effectively, but let us know if you'd like to, if you'd have any follow-up questions based on any of that in the chat. But moving forward, I see Katrina asked in the chat, how informed or familiar are the other judges or magistrates in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court of early childhood mental health issues and research? I think that's a great question for Judge Sweeney.
I think that is, I think we're all over the map. I think some people do a lot of reading and are probably pretty well informed, and others of us probably perhaps less so. I'm just being blunt. I will say that one of the issues with infants and toddlers in the court system is that they literally cannot speak. And the courts are a very talky bunch. So we tend to, it's easier for us to deal with teenagers because they can tell us what is going on in their world. Babies, not so much. And so like, I remember a few years ago when we were having a continuing legal education seminar on neurological development, and one of the panelists said that babies can be depressed. And there was a remarkable amount of pushback about that. I will admit that I was rather shocked at how resistant. This was an attorney who was pushing back, but you know, it's kind of a, so there's a lot of work to be done. One of the ways in which this program will be helpful is by introducing us to the people who can show us the way. And then as we train attorneys on this docket, then when they go into other courtrooms, they can specifically make motions for things that are going on in this courtroom. And as you begin to like diffuse that knowledge in the way that attorneys and social workers, that prosecutors practice, then other courtrooms will become educated. Even without them realizing it, they will become educated in development. But specifically when we were opening up the courthouse to teenagers in these custody cases, we did a lot of training. I mean, we specifically brought in people from the outside to lunch. Let's have lunch with the judges and the magistrates, and you can tell us about your research. It was very effective. I anticipate similar things happening here. Yeah, I guess but I would say like, you know, the infants and toddlers, because they can't speak, this is a whole area that's ripe for a lot of discussion in this docket. And I guess I want to add one other thing. I think one of the challenges for the courts, and this is probably true of any thing, you know, when you're talking about a baby being neglected or abused, that's traumatic. And so one of the issues that we deal with in the court system is, because that is such an uncomfortable subject, we would rather keep that at arm's length. So we don't really want to deal with that. So overcoming that resistance, it's not that people are being obstinate, it's that a lot of times they just don't want to be hurt themselves. And so I think the importance of recognizing that secondary or vicarious trauma is another thing that really is an issue, not just with the court system, but just across the board.
Yeah, thank you. I think you stated that really nicely. So thank you. And it's looking like we have more questions in the chat than we'll likely have time to get to before 1:30. So what I will do, if you had a question in the chat that we did not have time to get to, I will reach out to you afterwards and make sure that all of those questions can get answered.
One question in here is about teens and pregnant teens.
Mm-hmm.
And it says juvenile court parents and family advocate, is this in addition to their program for teens who may be pregnant? So how does that work with the teens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see Barbara asked that question. Is this in addition to a program for teens who may be pregnant? And it's likely that we might get young mothers who are participants in the Safe Babies Court Team program. And as mentioned in the slides, this approach really takes, we talked about a 2-generational approach, but sometimes it can even be 3-generational approach, but a multi-generational approach. So we're supporting the development of the infant, but we're also supporting the development and health and well-being of mom. And that comes with special considerations when it is a teen mom or a young mother. And so we can adapt and individualize the work that we're doing on our family teams to the unique needs of a young mother. Does anyone else on the panel want to add to those thoughts? So I'll try and answer a few of these before we have to end. I see Alyssa asked how many families can be on the docket and participating in Safe Babies Court Team at once. That is, what is our capacity? And the capacity, the typical capacity of a Safe Babies Court Team docket, speaking nationally from the other sites who have implemented this approach, is about 20 to 24 families at any given time. That number is basically reached by considering the capacity of having one community coordinator working with all of those families and the different family teams. Some sites, once they are into this work and they've been able to look at the data and see what's working, what's not, they decide to expand and hire additional community coordinators. And as a site hires additional community coordinators, they're able to expand the capacity of families served. But in short, at full capacity within the time frame of the next few years of this project, it'll be about 20 to 24 families. Great. And let's see what other questions that we have not yet gotten to. I see Lisa asked, well, she stated that there is a new child protection team recommendation that has recently been developed by the Department of Child and Family Services Advisory Board. And she asked, has this information been shared with them? And do you anticipate collaboration with the professionals who are handling child abuse and neglect as opposed to babies? And I know that we do have at least one representative who sits on the DCFS advisory board who is on our leadership team for this project. So I anticipate that there has been communication with that team. I'm not sure, Cynthia, if you have further information on those recommendations that have been developed by the advisory board.
Well, there has been a conversation with the executive about child protection teams and the impact they could have on our community. And so there is work going on to set up some additional meetings to talk about those recommendations.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Lisa. And then Carla asked, how is diversity being factored into Safe Baby's court team, i.e. judges, attorneys, etc.? And so that's a really important question because we know that a lot of times within the professionals and leadership within these systems don't always reflect the diversity of the folks who are recipients of these systems, and that's an issue. So when we talked about racial equity as related to this project, that's a really key focus, and we're really looking to bake racial equity into this project at all levels. And that's something that we're doing planning work. We're considering that racial equity planning work. We're working with some local experts in racial equity to start considering that now. But we'll really want the family team professionals to, as much as possible, reflect the diversity of the families that we'll be serving. I'm not sure if anyone on the panel has further thoughts on that, but that is something that we're currently in conversations around. And any feedback from any of the participants in the chat about how we can go about integrating racial equity and diversity into the work is more than welcome. So please continue to share with us through your involvement in the active community team and through our conversations. Okay, great. I'm looking to see if there are any outstanding questions in the chat. And I don't think I see any. So, but re-type your question, copy and paste your question again if I missed it, but I hope we got to all of them. So again, I just want to really thank all of the panelists who participated today and gave their insight onto the project, and for everyone that attended to learn more. I'm really excited to have, like Judge Sweeney mentioned, we had about like 160 participants at this event. And so I hope that all of you continue your involvement in this work in some way. And I'm going to put up the slide with my contact information on the screen as we end. So feel free to take down my contact information. And I hope to be connecting with you all again soon. So again, thank you all for coming, and you'll receive an email with a recording of the event and the slides from earlier. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.